As her house sank into the river, her son spots something hidden on the roof. Rebecca never imagined that morning would change her life forever. The water of the Cumberland River had risen overnight and was now flooding her small wooden house, carrying away the few pieces of furniture she owned. "Mommy, there's something strange up there," shouted Ethan, her 8-year-old son, pointing to the roof while holding his younger sister's hand. Rebecca was desperately trying to save some clothes when she heard the boy. The water was already up to her knees and rising fast. Lily, 5 years old, was crying and clinging to her leg, while the youngest, 3-year-old Noah, was in the arms of his 6-year-old sister, Emily Grace. "Ethan, this is no time for games. We need to get out of here now," Rebecca replied, but something in the boy's insistence made her look up. There was a metal structure she had never noticed before, partially covered by loose shingles. Ethan had climbed onto a floating chair and managed to get a better look. "Mommy, it's a box, a big metal box," insisted the boy. Rebecca hesitated. The water kept rising and they needed to leave immediately, but curiosity and desperation made her take a decision that would change everything. She grabbed a ladder that was still leaning against the wall, and even with the water at her waist, climbed up to check. What she found left her speechless. It was indeed a metal box, old and heavy, carefully hidden among the roof beams. With great effort, she managed to pull it out and quickly climbed down. "Kids, let's go, now," she shouted, clutching the box to her chest. They left the house just minutes before it was completely submerged. On the riverbank, breathless and wet, they took shelter under a large tree. The children were shivering from cold and fear, but Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the mysterious box. "What do you think is inside, Mommy?" asked Emily Grace, wiping tears from her dirty face. Rebecca looked around. Other neighbors had also lost their homes and were running back and forth. Mrs. Dorothy, the closest neighbor, approached with a towel. "My dear, what a tragedy. I've never seen the river rise so high," said the gray-haired woman. "But what is this box?" "I don't know, Mrs. Dorothy. Ethan found it on the roof of our house," replied Rebecca, still processing what had happened. "On the roof? How strange. Your house belonged to your father before, didn't it?" asked the neighbor with a curious look. Rebecca nodded. She had inherited the simple house from her father 5 years ago, when he passed. She never imagined there could be secrets hidden there. Mrs. Dorothy offered temporary shelter in her house, which was on higher ground and had escaped the flood. While the children took a warm bath and put on dry clothes the kind neighbor had lent them, Rebecca was finally able to examine the box more carefully. It was heavy and had a simple lock, already rusted with time. With an old knife, she managed to force it open. What she saw inside made her heart race. Documents, many old documents, all protected by plastic bags. There were also yellowed photographs and some jewelry she didn't recognize. But it was a letter with her name on the envelope that immediately caught her attention. With trembling hands, she opened the letter written by hand in her father's writing. "My dearest Rebecca, if you are reading this, it means you have discovered my secret. Forgive me for not telling you before, but I had my reasons. What you will find in this box will change your life. You are not poor as you always thought. I was, the owner of valuable land here in the region. I hid everything because your Aunt Patricia always tried to take what was ours. She doesn't know you exist as an heir. The documents prove you are the owner of 3 rural properties and a plot of land in the town where the central market operates today. Use wisely and protect our secrets. Your loving father, John Peterson." Rebecca read the letter 3 times before she could process what was written. She, a single mother who worked as a seamstress to support her children, was actually a landowner? It seemed impossible. The documents confirmed everything. There were deeds, old records, and even tax payment receipts her father had settled over the years. One of the properties was a cattle ranch, another was a plot with cocoa plantations, and the third was where a transportation company currently operated. "Rebecca, is everything okay in there?" asked Mrs. Dorothy from the kitchen. "Yes, I'm fine," she replied, quickly putting the documents back in the box. But her mind was racing. If she really owned these lands, why did she live in poverty? Why did her father never tell her anything? And who was this Aunt Patricia he mentioned? The children came into the living room, already cleaned and in dry clothes. Ethan ran up to her. "Mommy, what was in the box? Was it a treasure? asked the boy, his eyes shining with curiosity. "It was something very important, my love. Something your grandfather kept for us," answered Rebecca, hugging her son. "Were we rich and didn't know it?" asked Emily Grace, who even at 6 years old was very clever. "Perhaps, my daughter, perhaps." Mrs. Dorothy served hot soup for everyone. While the children ate, she pulled Rebecca aside. "My dear, I saw the papers you were reading. I know it's none of my business, but I need to tell you something about your father." Rebecca felt a tightness in her chest. What else would she discover that day? John was a good man, but he lived in fear, especially of his sister, Patricia. She always said he had stolen the lands from your father, your grandfather. There was a nasty family fight many years ago. Patricia is my aunt. I never heard my father speak of her. She lives here in town, has a big house on Main Street, and always boasted about being richer than her brother. She said John lived in poverty because he was lazy, but I always suspected there was more to it. The pieces began to fit together in Rebecca's mind. Her father had hidden the wealth and lived simply to protect himself from his greedy sister. "Where can I find this aunt?" "Better be careful, girl. Patricia isn't an easy person. She has a lot of influence in town and doesn't like to be contradicted." That night, after the children fell asleep, Rebecca stayed awake planning her next steps. She needed to verify the authenticity of the documents and discover how to claim her inheritance. But mainly, she needed to understand why her father had chosen to live in poverty instead of using what belonged to him. The next day, she left the children with Mrs. Dorothy and went to the town clerk's office. The clerk, Mr. George, was a middle-aged man who had worked there for decades. "John Peterson's documents?" he said, scratching his head. "That name sounds familiar. Let me check the old archives." After a long search, Mr. George returned with a look of surprise. "Miss, these documents are genuine. Your father was indeed the owner of these lands, but there's something strange here." "What?" "There are records that someone tried to contest the ownership of these properties several times. A certain Patricia Peterson. She claimed the lands were hers by right of primogeniture." Rebecca felt a chill in her stomach. Her suspicion was being confirmed. "But she never managed to prove anything," continued Mr. George. "Your father's documents were always valid. In fact, she's the one who must have false documents." "How so?" "Well, these are just my suspicions, but I've known that family for years. Patricia was always very ambitious. When your father died, she tried to take everything, but John managed to prove his rights. That must be why he hid and lived a simple life." Rebecca thanked her for the information and left the county clerk's office with more questions than answers. She decided it was time to meet her aunt in person. Patricia's house was in the most affluent part of the small town. It was a large, imposing structure, which contrasted completely with the simple house where Rebecca had grown up. She took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A woman of about 60 opened the door. She was tall, elegant, but with a cold, calculating gaze. Her clothes were expensive, and her hair was impeccably styled. "Yes?" she asked in an arrogant tone. "I'm Rebecca, John Peterson's daughter. I believe you are my aunt." Patricia's expression changed immediately. First surprise, then something that seemed like contained anger. "John's daughter," she said, looking Rebecca up and down. "I didn't know he had children." "I have 4 children, actually. I came here because I found some documents and wanted to talk about my father's inheritance." Patricia hesitated for a moment, as if calculating something. "Come in. Let's talk." The inside of the house was even more luxurious. Expensive furniture, artwork on the walls, Persian rugs. Everything was very different from the simple life Rebecca had always known. "Sit down," said Patricia, pointing to an armchair. "What documents are these?" Rebecca decided to be cautious and not reveal everything at once. "Documents about properties my father owned, land here in the region." Patricia let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, my dear. Your father was always a dreamer. Those lands don't exist anymore. They were sold off long ago to settle debts. I have the original documents. They prove the properties are legitimate." Patricia's face hardened. "Documents can be forged, my dear. Besides, even if they were real, I'm the eldest sister." By rights, everything should have passed to me when our father died. But the county records, the records can be wrong, Patricia interrupted. Look, I'll be frank with you. I don't know what game your father was playing, but he died poor for a reason. If he had valuable land, do you think he would have lived in that miserable little house? Rebecca felt intimidated by her aunt's aggressive posture, but she didn't let it shake her. He had his reasons for living simply. Reasons? Patricia stood up and began to pace the room. The only reason was that he had nothing. John was always irresponsible with money. He spent everything he inherited, and then went around inventing stories about secret lands. You're lying, said Rebecca, also standing up. Patricia stopped and stared at her coldly. Watch your words, girl. You don't know me. I can be very dangerous when crossed. The veiled threat made Rebecca realize she was treading on dangerous ground. She decided to retreat for now. I'm sorry if I offended you. I just want to understand the situation. The situation is simple, said Patricia, sitting back down. Your father was a dreamer who died poor. Those lands you mention either don't exist or were sold off long ago. My advice is that you forget these fantasies and find a better job to support your children. Rebecca left her aunt's house more confused than before. Patricia had been too hostile for someone who supposedly had nothing to hide. Her reaction indicated she knew exactly what Rebecca was talking about. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like, and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, back at Mrs. Dorothy's house, Rebecca told her neighbor about the meeting with Patricia. I warned you she wasn't an easy person, the old lady said, but from what you tell me, she definitely knows something. Nobody gets that upset for no reason. What do you think I should do? First, verify if these properties really exist. Go see them in person. Then, look for a trustworthy lawyer. But what if Patricia finds out I'm investigating? My dear, if these documents are true, you are the rightful owner of these lands. You have every right to investigate what is yours. The next day, Rebecca decided to visit the properties mentioned in the documents. The first was a cattle ranch located about 15 kilometers from town. She took a bus and, after a 40-minute journey on dirt roads, arrived at the place. To her surprise, the ranch existed and was fully operational. There was cattle grazing, workers laboring, and a well-maintained main house. At the gate, a sign read, Clearwater Ranch, property of Patricia Peterson. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. Her aunt was running a property that, according to the documents, belonged to her. Can I help you? Asked a man who approached. He was the ranch foreman. I'm looking for information about this property. How long has Mrs. Patricia been the owner? Mrs. Patricia? She's always been the owner here. I've worked for her for over 20 years. And before her, who was the owner? The foreman scratched his head, thoughtful. Well, I'm not sure, but I think it was her brother before. A fellow named John. But he sold everything to her and left the area. That was a long time ago. He sold it? Are you sure? That's what I was told. Why so many questions? Rebecca made up an excuse about doing research on the area's history and left. But now she was sure. Patricia was in possession of properties that did not belong to her. The second property was the land with the cacao plantation. It was in another direction, also outside of town. This time, Rebecca asked an acquaintance who had a car to take her there. The situation repeated itself. The plantation was productive and well kept, but there was also a sign indicating Patricia Peterson as the owner. This plantation yields well, commented the neighbor who had driven her. Mrs. Patricia is very sharp in business. How long has she owned these lands? I'm not sure, but she's always been rich. They say she inherited everything from her father. Rebecca didn't comment, but her indignation grew with each discovery. Patricia had wrongfully taken everything that belonged to her father, and consequently to her. The third property was the urban lot, where the central market and a transport company operated. This one she managed to verify on foot, as it was in the town itself. The land was truly valuable. It was located in the busiest commercial area of town and must have been worth a fortune. Once again, all visible records indicated Patricia Peterson as the owner. Rebecca felt lost. How could she prove those properties were hers if all the official records listed her aunt as the owner? The documents she found in the attic were authentic, but could she use them to recover what was rightfully hers? She decided to look for a lawyer. In the small town, there were only 2 law offices. She chose that of Attia's Richard Thompson, who had a good reputation. Attia's Richard was a 50-year-old man, bald and wearing glasses. He listened attentively as Rebecca explained the whole situation and showed the documents. "These documents appear to be authentic," he said after examining everything carefully. "But I'll be honest with you, it will be a difficult battle." "Why?" "Patricia Peterson is one of the most influential people in town. She has political contacts, is friends with the mayor, and has a lot of money to hire the best lawyers. Besides, she has been in possession of these properties for years. The law favors those in possession." "But if the documents prove my father was the true owner?" "Yes, but she probably has documents too. She can claim she legitimately bought everything from your father. It will be your word against hers." "And if her documents are fake?" "We'll have to prove that, and it won't be easy." Rebecca felt discouraged, but Attie Richard Thompson continued, "However, it's not impossible. If your documents are truly original and predate hers, we have a chance. But you'll need money for legal costs, and it could take years to resolve." "Years?" "Patricia will contest everything. She has the resources to drag out the case as long as possible, hoping you'll give up." Rebecca left the lawyer's office weighed down with worry. How could she afford a legal battle against someone so powerful? And for how long could she support her children while fighting in court? When she got home, she found an unpleasant surprise. Patricia was in the living room talking with Mrs. Dorothy and playing with the children. "Look, Mommy, Aunt Patricia brought us candy," said Emily Grace, running to her. Patricia stood up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, dear. I came to meet my nephews and nieces. They're beautiful." Rebecca felt a mix of anger and fear. What was Patricia doing there? "Thank you for the visit," she said coldly. "Can I speak with you in private?" asked Patricia. They went out to the backyard, leaving the children with Mrs. Dorothy. "What do you want?" "I want to resolve our situation amicably," said Patricia, in a tone that tried to be conciliatory. "I heard you've been visiting some properties and looking for a lawyer." Rebecca didn't answer, just stared at her. "I'll be direct. I know you have some old papers from your father, documents that could cause confusion about certain properties. I came here to make an offer." "What offer?" "Forget those documents. In exchange, I'll give you a sum of money. Enough for you to rebuild your house and start a new life with your children. And if I refuse?" Patricia's fake smile disappeared. "That would be a shame. A single mother with 4 small children can face many hardships. Accidents happen. Jobs disappear. It would be terrible if something bad happened to you or the children." The threat was clear. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. "How long do I have to decide?" "1 week. After that, I'll have to take more drastic measures." Patricia left, leaving Rebecca trembling with anger and fear. Now it wasn't just about money, but about her family's safety. That night, after everyone was asleep, Rebecca lay thinking about her options. She could accept Patricia's money and forget everything. It would be the safest for the children. But that would mean giving up an inheritance that could change their lives forever. Besides, it would be unfair to let Patricia continue to benefit from something she had stolen. The next morning, she made a decision. She would not be intimidated. She returned to the records office and asked to have certified copies made of all the documents she had found. Then, she went back to Attie Richard Thompson's office. "Will you take my case?" she asked directly. "I will, but I need to be clear about the risks." "I know the risks. Patricia has already threatened me personally." Attie Richard Thompson raised his eyebrows. "She threatened you. That changes everything. We'll file a complaint as well." "I have no proof. It would be my word against hers." "Even so, it's important to have it on record, and I'll request protection for you and the children." Attie Richard Thompson immediately began working on the case. He requested a full investigation of the properties and asked that all of Patricia's documents be analyzed to verify their authenticity. Meanwhile, Rebecca returned to Mrs. Dorothy's house with the children. The situation was getting tense, and she feared for their safety. 2 days later, Atty Richard Thompson called with important news. "Rebecca, I need to speak with you urgently. Can you come to my office?" When she arrived, Atty Richard Thompson was visibly excited. "We have good news. The initial examination of the documents confirmed that yours are authentic and predate Patricia's. Furthermore, we found some irregularities in her documents." "What kind of irregularities?" "Signatures that don't match, dates that don't make chronological sense, and some stamps that appear to have been tampered with." Rebecca felt a wave of hope. "Does this mean I can recover the properties?" "It's still too early to celebrate, but we're on the right track. I'll file a repossession action this very week." "What about Patricia? She won't accept this peacefully." "That's why I need you to be very careful. Avoid going out alone, especially at night. And keep the children always close to people you trust." Rebecca agreed and left the office more hopeful. Finally, she was beginning to see a light at the end of the tunnel, but her joy was short-lived. When she got home, she found Mrs. Dorothy very nervous. "Rebecca, something strange happened. A man was here looking for you. He said he was from the power company and needed to check the electrical installation, but he seemed very suspicious to me." "Suspicious how?" "He asked a lot of questions about you and the children. He wanted to know your schedules, where you usually go. He didn't seem interested in the electricity." Rebecca felt a tightness in her chest. Patricia was making good on her threats. "Where are the children?" "They're playing in the backyard. But Rebecca, I don't think you should stay here. That man might come back." Rebecca agreed. It was time to leave town for a few days until the legal situation was resolved. She called her cousin Jennifer, who lived in a neighboring town 2 hours away. She explained the situation without going into too much detail and asked for temporary shelter. "Of course, cousin, you can come here. I have space, and it'll be nice to have company." That same afternoon, Rebecca packed some clothes for herself and the children and prepared to travel. She left a message with Atty Richard Thompson about where she would be and left. The trip was quiet, but Rebecca couldn't relax. She kept looking in the bus's rearview mirror, afraid she was being followed. Jennifer lived in a small but cozy house on the outskirts of town. She was divorced and had 2 teenage children, so the house got quite full, but everyone settled in. "What is this inheritance mess all about?" asked Jennifer after the children had gone to sleep. Rebecca told her everything that had happened. Jennifer listened in silence, shaking her head in disapproval. "I always knew that Aunt Patricia was no good," she said. "I remember when we were kids, our family used to talk about her. They said she was ambitious and unscrupulous." "Did you ever meet her?" "Personally, no. But our mothers were cousins, remember? And they always said Patricia had fought with John over an inheritance." "What kind of fight?" "I don't know the details, but I heard that when their father died, she tried to take everything. She said that being the woman and the eldest, she had more right. John had to fight in court to get his share." This information was new to Rebecca. It seemed the inheritance feud between the siblings went way back. "Do you think I have a chance of winning? If your documents are genuine, you should. But be careful. People like Patricia don't give up easily." The next morning, Atty Richard Thompson called with news. "Rebecca, we filed the lawsuit yesterday. Patricia has already been notified and has a deadline to respond. How did she react?" "I don't know yet, but I have bad news too. I found out she hired one of the most expensive law firms in the capital. She's going to fight with everything she's got." "Is that bad?" "It means she has resources and will try to drag out the process. But don't be discouraged. Our cause is just and we have solid evidence." After hanging up the phone, Rebecca felt anxious again. The battle would be long and difficult. She spent 3 weeks at Jennifer's house. The children adapted well to the routine and even made new friends at the local school. But Rebecca knew she couldn't stay forever, imposing her presence in her cousin's house. Atty Richard Thompson called frequently with updates about the case. Patricia's defense had been filed, claiming she had bought all the properties legitimately from John and that Rebecca's documents were old forgeries. "They're trying to turn the tables," explained Atty Richard Thompson. "Now they're claiming your documents are the fake ones. But the expert analysis already proved they're authentic." "Yes, but they hired their own experts. It's going to be a technical battle too." The situation seemed to be getting more and more complicated. It was then that Rebecca received an unexpected call. It was Mrs. Dorothy. "Rebecca, my dear, you need to come back. Something important happened." "What is it?" "An elderly man showed up here looking for you. He said he knew your father and has important information about the fight with Patricia, but he only wants to speak in person." Rebecca hesitated. It could be a trap set by Patricia. "What's this man like?" "Mr. George, the old employee from your grandfather's ranch. He must be about 80 now. He seems honest and is very nervous. He said he kept a secret for years, but can't bear it anymore." Rebecca decided to return. If there was a chance to get more information about the family's past, she needed to investigate. She arranged with Jennifer that if she didn't hear from her in 2 days, she should contact the police. Then she went back to her hometown with the children. Mr. George was waiting at Mrs. Dorothy's house. He was indeed a very elderly man, with white hair and trembling hands, but with lively, intelligent eyes. "You look just like your father when he was young," he said, moved to see Rebecca. "Mrs. Dorothy said you have information about my father and Patricia." "Yes, I do, my dear, and it was about time someone learned the truth." Mr. George told a story that left Rebecca shocked. He had worked for her grandfather when he was young and witnessed everything that happened after his death. "Your grandfather was a fair man," he said. "He had divided the land equally between his 2 children. John got the rural properties, and Patricia got the city house and some money. But she wasn't satisfied." "Why not?" "She wanted everything. She claimed that being a woman, she would have a harder time supporting herself and that she deserved the larger share. She began pressuring John to sell everything to her for a low price. And my father agreed. At first, no. But Patricia started making up stories. She told everyone that John was irresponsible, that he drank too much, that he didn't know how to take care of the land. She even spread rumors that he had gambling debts." Rebecca listened in silence, beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. "The pressure became unbearable," continued Mr. George. "John was a simple man and didn't like trouble. Patricia managed to convince some important people in town to pressure him too." "What kind of pressure?" "Veiled threats, difficulties getting bank loans, problems with ranch inspections. Patricia had connections and knew how to use her influence." "So my father sold the land to her?" "Not exactly. He signed some papers he thought were just formalities. Patricia said they were to regularize the situation at the notary's office, but they were actually deeds of transfer." Rebecca felt anger rise in her chest. "My father was deceived. Completely. When he realized what had happened, it was too late. Patricia was in possession of everything and had documents that looked legal. Why didn't my father fight it in court? He tried, but Patricia had powerful lawyers and he didn't have the money to fund a legal battle. Besides, she threatened to harm you." "Me?" "John had just married your mother and you had been born. Patricia said that if he kept bothering her, she would make sure you and your mother went without." The puzzle pieces finally clicked for Rebecca. Her father had given up fighting to protect his family. Was that why he hid the original documents? Exactly. He kept everything, waiting for the day he could use the evidence to get back what was his. But that day never came. "Can you testify about this in court?" Mr. George hesitated. "I can, but I'm afraid. Patricia is vengeful and still has a lot of power in town. Mr. George, I need your help. Without your testimony, I could lose everything." The old man was thoughtful for a few minutes. "All right," he finally said. "I'm old anyway. It's time for justice." Rebecca immediately called Atty, Richard Thompson, who was excited by the news. "Testimony like that could completely change the course of the case," he said. "I'll include it in our strategy." But Atty Thompson also had worrying news. "Rebecca, Patricia has filed a petition asking for you to be investigated for document forgery. She's trying to turn you from victim into defendant." "Can she do that?" "She can try, but our testimony from Mr. George will completely dismantle her version." In the following days, the pressure on Rebecca increased considerably. Patricia had hired a private detective to investigate her life, trying to find anything she could use against her. The detective showed up at the children's school asking questions, went to the old dressmaker's shop where Rebecca worked, and even spoke to old neighbors. He was clearly trying to build a negative profile of her. Mrs. Dorothy was outraged by the situation. What kind of woman does this, investigating a mother who only wants what's rightfully hers? A desperate woman, Rebecca answered. Patricia knows she's wrong and that's why she's trying to discredit me. Atava Thompson advised Rebecca to document all attempts at intimidation and investigation. Everything would be used as proof of Patricia's bad faith. Meanwhile, Mr. George had given his detailed statement, which was filed in the case. His version of the facts matched perfectly with the documents found in the roof. The hearing was scheduled for a month later. It would be the decisive moment to find out who was right. During this period, Rebecca lived through moments of extreme anxiety. She slept poorly, had nightmares, and was always tense. The children sensed something was wrong, but she tried to protect them from the details of the situation. 1 week before the hearing, something happened that almost made her give up everything. Ethan, her oldest son, disappeared for a few hours. He had gone out to play in the backyard and simply vanished. Rebecca searched the whole neighborhood, desperate. When she finally found him, he was scared and confused. "Mommy, a man took me for a car ride," said the boy, trembling. "What man? What did he say?" "He said he knew you and wanted to show me something. But then he brought me back and told me not to tell anyone." Rebecca was terrified. It was clearly a demonstration that Patricia could reach her children whenever she wanted. She called Atty Thompson, who immediately contacted the police. A police report was filed and the family's protection was increased. "Rebecca, I'm worried," said Atty Thompson. "Patricia is getting desperate. Desperate people can do unthinkable things. Are you suggesting I give up?" "I'm suggesting you consider accepting a settlement. If she offers a reasonable amount, it might be better than risking the children's safety." Rebecca was torn. On one hand, she wanted justice and what was rightfully hers. On the other, she couldn't put her children at risk. That night, she spoke with Mrs. Dorothy about the situation. "My dear, only you can decide what's best for your family," said the neighbor. "But remember, if you give in now, Patricia will know she can intimidate you whenever she wants, and your children will grow up knowing their mother gave up when things got tough." "But what if she really harms them?" "She won't. People like Patricia prefer to threaten rather than act. Action leaves traces. She's too clever to do anything that could be traced back to her." Mrs. Dorothy's words made sense to Rebecca. She decided to keep fighting but doubled her precautions with the children. The day of the hearing finally arrived. Rebecca went to the courthouse with Atty, Richard Thompson, wearing her best clothes and trying to control her nerves. Patricia was already there, accompanied by 3 expensive, elegant lawyers. She wore a designer suit and flashy jewelry, clearly trying to display her economic power. The judge, Judge Henry Morrison, was a serious and experienced man. He listened carefully to the arguments from both sides. Attorney Richard Thompson presented the original documents, the expert report confirming their authenticity, and Mr. George's testimony about how Patricia had deceived John. Patricia's lawyers argued that Rebecca's documents were well-crafted forgeries, that Patricia had legitimately purchased all the properties, and that Mr. George was being influenced by Rebecca to lie. The hearing lasted almost 4 hours. In the end, the judge said he would analyze all the evidence and give his decision in 2 weeks. Leaving the courthouse, Patricia approached Rebecca. "I can still offer a settlement," she said quietly. "A generous sum in exchange for your permanent silence." "I refuse," Rebecca replied firmly. "You'll regret this," said Patricia, walking away. The 2 weeks of waiting were the longest of Rebecca's life. She could barely concentrate on anything, constantly thinking about the judge's decision. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Atty Richard Thompson called on a Wednesday morning. "Rebecca, the decision is out. Can you come to my office?" Rebecca rushed there, her heart racing. "Well?" she asked as soon as she entered the room. Atty Richard Thompson smiled. "You won?" "The judge ruled in your favor on all counts." Rebecca felt her legs go weak and had to sit down. "I really won?" "Completely. The judge considered your documents authentic, believed Mr. George's testimony, and ordered Patricia to return all the properties immediately." "And will she accept it?" "She can appeal. But it will be hard to overturn this decision. The evidence against her is very solid. Rebecca began to cry with relief and joy. After months of struggle and suffering, she had finally achieved justice. How long until I can take possession of the properties? Patricia has 30 days to vacate everything. If she doesn't comply, it will be enforced by the court. Rebecca left the lawyer's office walking on air. She ran home to tell the news to Mrs. Dorothy and the children. "We won!" she shouted as soon as she walked through the door. "The lands are ours!" Mrs. Dorothy hugged her, moved. The children didn't fully understand the meaning, but they could tell it was something very good from their mother's joy. "Are we rich now, Mummy?" asked Emily Grace. "We're going to have a better life, my dear. A much better life." But the euphoria didn't last long. The next day, Attaway Richard Thompson called with worrying news. "Rebecca, Patricia has filed an appeal, and something strange happened. Mr. George has changed his testimony." "Changed how?" "He sought out her lawyer and said he was confused when he testified, that he was mistaken about some facts. He's trying to nullify his own testimony." Rebecca was shocked. "Why would he do that?" "I don't know, but I suspect Patricia may have pressured him somehow." Rebecca decided to seek out Mr. George personally. She went to his house, a simple residence on the outskirts of town. The elderly man received her, visibly nervous. "Mr. George, why did you change your testimony?" I can't get involved in this anymore, Rebecca. Please understand." "But you said you wanted justice." "Things have changed. I can't help anymore." Rebecca realized he was afraid of something. "Did Patricia threaten you?" Mr. George hesitated, looked around and whispered, "She found out where my grandson goes to school, said it would be a shame if something happened to him on his way there." Rebecca felt outrage at Patricia's low tactics, using the same intimidation tactics she had used against her father decades ago. "Mr. George, you can't let her win like this." "My dear, I'm already old. My grandson has his whole life ahead of him. I can't take that risk." Rebecca understood his position but felt defeated. Without Mr. George's testimony, her case became much weaker. She returned to Attaway Richard Thompson's office to discuss their options. "We still have the original documents," he said, "but without the testimony it's harder to prove how Patricia appropriated the land." "What now?" "We'll fight her appeal. But I need to be honest, our chances have decreased significantly." Rebecca felt lost again. Just when she thought she had won, Patricia found a way to complicate everything. Then something unexpected happened. An unknown woman sought out Rebecca at Mrs. Dorothy's house. "My name is Susan," said the woman, approximately 40 years old. "I'm a former employee of Patricia's accounting office. I heard about your situation and I want to help." "Help how?" "I know things she's done. Forgeries, blackmail, threats. I worked for her for 5 years and saw a lot of wrongdoing." Rebecca felt a new hope. "What kind of things?" "Fake documents, mostly. Patricia has had schemes to appropriate land for years. You're not her first victim." "Do you have proof?" "Yes, some. I kept copies of documents because I knew they might be useful one day." Susan explained that she had kept the evidence as a way to protect herself from Patricia. She knew she was a dangerous boss and wanted something to defend herself with in case she was betrayed. "Why do you want to help me now?" "Because I identified with your story. I was also her victim. When I left the company, she claimed I had stolen money. I managed to prove my innocence, but my reputation was almost destroyed." Attaway Richard Thompson was excited when Rebecca told him about Susan. If she has documents proving a pattern of forgery by Patricia, that could completely change our case. They scheduled a meeting with Susan for the next day. She brought a folder full of documents that left Attaway Richard Thompson impressed. "This is a gold mine," he said, examining the papers. "Here is proof of at least 3 other cases where Patricia forged documents to appropriate property. Can I use this information?" "Of course you can. This establishes a pattern of criminal behavior." With the new evidence, Attaway Richard Thompson filed a supplemental petition in the case, attaching all the evidence provided by Susan. Patricia's response was immediate and aggressive. Her lawyers claimed Susan was a dishonest employee fired for cause and was trying to get revenge by making up lies. But the documentary evidence was too solid to ignore. The judge ordered a new hearing to evaluate the additional evidence. During this period, Patricia intensified her intimidation attempts. Rebecca began receiving anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. Strange cars were parked in front of Mrs. Dorothy's house. The children were followed on their way to school. The psychological pressure was affecting the entire family. Emily Grace began having nightmares. Ethan became aggressive and nervous, and the younger ones cried constantly. "I don't know if I can go on," Rebecca confessed to Mrs. Dorothy. "I'm destroying my children's childhood because of money." "It's not about money," the wise neighbor replied. "It's about justice. Your children will understand that when they grow up." But the situation worsened when Emily Grace came home crying after school. "Mommy, a man told me you were doing bad things and that maybe the police would arrest you." Rebecca felt a fury she had never experienced before. Patricia had crossed the line by trying to scare a 6-year-old child. She immediately called Atty Richard Thompson. "That's enough! I want to sue Patricia for intimidation and threatening a minor." "Calm down, Rebecca. Let's focus on the main lawsuit. If we win this one, she won't have any power left to intimidate anyone." The second hearing was scheduled for the following week. This time, Susan was present to testify in person. Her testimony was devastating for Patricia. In great detail, she described how her former employer falsified documents, bribed public officials, and intimidated landowners to force them to sell their properties. Patricia's lawyers tried to discredit Susan, but she had documents to prove each of her claims. The high point of the testimony was when Susan revealed she had secretly recorded a conversation where Patricia admitted to deceiving John Peterson. "I have the recording here," she said, showing a small recorder. Attorney Richard Thompson smiled. It was the definitive proof they needed. The recording was played in court. On the tape, Patricia's voice could be heard clearly. "John was always very naive. It was easy to get him to sign those papers. He didn't even read properly what he was signing. By the time he realized he had lost everything, it was too late." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Patricia was visibly shaken. Her lawyers requested a recess to consult with their client. When the hearing resumed, there was an unexpected turn of events. Patricia's lawyers announced that she wanted to make a deal. "Our client acknowledges there may have been misunderstandings in the past," the lead attorney said. "She is willing to transfer the properties to the plaintiff in exchange for not being prosecuted criminally." Attorney Richard Thompson looked at Rebecca, who nodded. It was all she wanted, her land back. The agreement was formally signed in court. Patricia committed to transferring all properties to Rebecca within 15 days and to paying compensation for the profits wrongfully obtained over the years. Leaving the courtroom, Patricia approached Rebecca one last time. "You won this time," she said bitterly, "but be careful. You now have everything I built over decades. I hope you know what to do with it. I'll do what my father should have done, use it to take care of my family and help other people." Patricia walked away without responding. 2 weeks later, Rebecca was officially in possession of all the properties. It was hard to believe she had suddenly become one of the wealthiest women in the region. The first thing she did was visit the properties with the children. At the cattle ranch, Ethan was fascinated by the animals. At the cocoa plantation, the girls had fun running between the trees. At the urban lot, everyone was impressed by the movement of people and vehicles. "Is all of this really ours, Mommy?" asked Emily Grace. "Yes, my dear. It's our inheritance from the grandfather you never met." Rebecca hired managers to run the businesses while she learned about them. The profits were substantial, much more than she had ever dreamed of having. But with the wealth came new challenges. People who had never shown interest in her, and the children began to appear. Distant relatives she didn't even know existed approached offering help to manage the assets. Romantic suitors also emerged, more interested in her new financial situation than in her as a person. Rebecca quickly learned to distinguish between those who were sincere and those who had ulterior motives. The adaptation to the new life wasn't easy for the children. At school, they began to be treated differently. Some classmates became envious, others tried to take advantage of the situation. It was necessary to talk a lot with them about how to handle the change. "Why did some people become strange with us, Mum?" asked Ethan. Because some people change when they know you have money, my son. That's why it's important for us to keep being the same people we've always been. Rebecca decided to use part of the wealth to help the community. She created a fund to renovate the local school, another to improve the health clinic, and also offered scholarships for underprivileged youth. Mrs. Dorothy, who had been her friend during the difficult times, was one of the first to benefit. Rebecca completely renovated her house and offered to support her in her final years. "You don't have to do this, my dear," said the neighbor, moved. "Yes, I do. You were a mother to me and the children when we needed it most. Now it's our turn to take care of you." The news of Rebecca's victory spread throughout the region. Other people who had been victims of similar schemes began seeking her out for help and advice. Rebecca discovered that Patricia had defrauded dozens of families over the years. She decided to use her resources to help other victims recover what was theirs. She created a public interest law office, hiring Atira Richard Thompson and other lawyers to offer free services to people who couldn't afford a legal battle. 6 months after the victory, Rebecca was unrecognizable. The insecure and frightened woman had transformed into a confident and respected businesswoman, but she hadn't forgotten her humble origins. She continued living in the same region, just in a larger and more comfortable house. The children attended better schools, but were raised to value what they had and help those in need. Ethan, the boy who had discovered the box in the roof, developed a special interest in cattle ranching. He spent entire afternoons at the ranch, learning about the animals and the business. "Mom, when I grow up I want to take care of the ranch," he said one day. "And you'll take care of it very well, my son. But first, you need to study hard." Emily Grace showed a talent for numbers and enjoyed following the company's financial reports. Even though she was young, she asked smart questions about investments and profits. Lily and Noah, still very young, simply enjoyed the new life with more toys, nice clothes, and interesting outings. 1 year after the discovery of the box, Rebecca organized a party to celebrate. She invited all the people who had helped her during the struggle: Mrs. Dorothy, Mr. George, who had reconciled with her after the threats ended, Susan, Attor's Richard Thompson, and many others. During the party, Ethan asked to speak. "I want to thank everyone who helped my mother," said the 9-year-old boy seriously, "and I want to say that I'm proud to have found the box that changed our life." Everyone applauded, moved. Rebecca looked around, seeing the people she loved gathered in her new home, and remembered the terrible morning when she had almost lost everything in the flood. If it weren't for Ethan's curiosity and persistence, she would never have discovered the secret her father had kept. The box hidden in the roof had revealed much more than documents. It had revealed a story of injustice that could finally be set right. That night, after everyone had left, Rebecca put the children to bed and sat in the backyard, looking at the stars. She thought of her father, who had sacrificed his wealth to protect the family. She thought about how life can change completely in a single day. She thought of the responsibilities she now carried and the opportunities she could offer her children. But mostly she thought about the importance of never giving up the fight for what is right, even when all seems lost. The box Ethan found in the roof didn't just contain documents. It contained justice, dignity, and a better future for her family. And that, Rebecca knew, was priceless. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. 2 years had passed since that fateful day of the flood. Rebecca had settled completely into her new life as a businesswoman. The 3 properties she had inherited were thriving under her careful management. The cattle ranch had increased its herd by 50%. Rebecca invested in new breeding techniques and hired specialized veterinarians. What once yielded a modest sum now generated substantial profits. The cocoa plantation had been modernized with irrigation systems and new machinery. Productivity tripled, making it one of the most productive properties in the region. The urban lot had been developed into a modern commercial center, housing stores, restaurants, and various services. The monthly rental income was impressive, but what made Rebecca proudest was the social impact of her initiatives. The public interest law firm she had created had already helped over 100 families recover properties usurped by fraudulent schemes. Ati. Richard Thompson, now the director of the office, worked with a team of 6 lawyers specializing in land recovery cases. The work revealed the problem was much broader than they had initially imagined. "Rebecca, we've discovered an organized network," said Atty Richard during a meeting. Patricia was just one piece in a much larger scheme of rural land appropriation. How so? She worked in partnership with corrupt notaries, public officials, and other business people. Together, they developed a system to appropriate properties from humble families who didn't have the resources to defend themselves. The revelation led Rebecca to expand her social justice activities even further. She created a documentation center to help people organize their papers and protect their rights. She also established an educational fund to teach rural families about their legal rights and how to protect themselves from real estate scams. Ethan, now 10 years old, had become Rebecca's right hand on the ranch. The boy had a natural talent for handling animals and showed impressive maturity for his age. "Mom, I think we should invest in selective breeding," he said one day, using terms he had learned from the veterinarian. Selective breeding. It's when we choose the best bulls and cows to have calves. That way, our herd gets better and better. Rebecca smiled, admiring her son's intelligence. "And you think it's worth the investment?" "Absolutely. Dr. Michael said in 3 years we could have the best herd in the region." Emily Grace, at 8 years old, had developed an even greater passion for numbers. She spent hours studying the company's financial reports and made surprisingly mature suggestions. "Mom, why don't we invest some of the profits from the commercial center in stocks?" she asked during dinner. "Stocks? I read online it's a way to make money grow. If we choose good companies, our money can earn much more than in a savings account." Rebecca was impressed. Her 8-year-old daughter was giving financial advice that many adults wouldn't know how to give. Lily, now 7, had discovered a love for books. She read voraciously and dreamed of becoming a writer. She was always inventing stories about princesses who saved their kingdoms from greedy villains. Noah, the youngest at 5, was the most artistic in the family. He drew constantly and showed an early talent for music. Rebecca had hired private tutors to develop their talents. The children's transformation was remarkable. From frightened and needy children, they had become confident and engaged youngsters. But Rebecca always worried about keeping their feet on the ground. She established strict rules about the use of money and taught them about the responsibility that came with wealth. Once a month, she took them to distribute food in needy communities so they would never forget their roots. One day she received an unexpected letter. It was from Patricia. "Rebecca, I know it may seem strange to receive a letter from me after everything that happened. I'm writing because I need to say some things that have been tormenting me for months. First, I apologize. Not for what I did to your father. At the time, I thought I was protecting what was rightfully mine. But for the threats I made against you and your children, that was unforgivable. Second, I want you to know that I am impressed with what you have done. I use you as a model for what I should have done with the wealth I had. Instead of helping people, I used it only to gain more power. Third, I am ill. The doctors say I have only a few months left. I'm writing this letter because I want to make peace with myself before I go. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that your example has made me reflect on many things. Perhaps if I had met someone like you earlier, my life would have been different. Use well what you have achieved. You deserve all of it and more. Patricia. Rebecca read the letter several times, feeling a mix of emotions. Anger for what Patricia had done, pity for her health condition, and also a strange satisfaction in knowing that her former enemy acknowledged her mistakes. She discussed the letter with Mrs. Dorothy, who at 72 remained her closest confidant. "What do you think I should do?" "It depends on what your heart says, my child." "My heart says she did me great harm, but also that she is suffering now. Then perhaps it is time to show the forgiveness that Jesus taught us." The next day, Rebecca went to visit Patricia. She found a woman completely different from the one she had known 2 years before. She was thin, pale, and visibly frail. "I didn't expect you to come," said Patricia, surprised. "I received your letter." "And you came for what? To get revenge on a dying woman?" I came to say that I forgive you." Patricia was silent for a few minutes, processing the words. "Why?" "Because holding a grudge would only harm me, and because I see you are already paying for your mistakes. I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Perhaps not, but I need to forgive for my own peace." Rebecca spent an hour talking with Patricia. The former enemy told of her difficult childhood, her fears of being poor, and how greed had taken over her life. "I was always afraid of not having enough," explained Patricia. "That's why I could never stop wanting more. And now? Now I realize I never had what truly matters: love, family, true friends. I died rich in money and poor in everything else." When Rebecca left the house, she felt lighter. Forgiveness had truly released a weight she had been carrying in her heart. Patricia passed away 3 months later. Surprisingly, she left a will in which she donated her entire remaining fortune to the educational fund Rebecca had created. "She really changed in the end," commented Atty Richard Thompson after reading the will. "People can change even at the last moment," replied Rebecca. "It's an important lesson for me and for the children." With the additional resources from Patricia's will, Rebecca expanded her social activities even further. She created a free technical school for young people in the region, focusing on modern agriculture and rural management. The school was a great success. Dozens of young people graduated from courses in veterinary science, agribusiness, and rural technology, securing well-paid jobs in the area. Ethan, even as a boy, was already showing interest in being part of the family's social projects. "Mum, when I grow up, I want to create a special agriculture school for kids," he said. "A school for kids?" "Yes, to teach city children how to grow their own food. That way they learn where food comes from and respect nature more." Ethan's idea impressed Rebecca. Even at 10 years old, her son was already thinking of ways to contribute to society. Emily Grace, in turn, had developed a financial education project for families in need. "Mum, many people lose their properties because they don't know how to manage money," the girl explained. "If we teach them how to do the math and plan their expenses, they'll be better protected." At 8 years old, Emily Grace already displayed a financial maturity that many adults lacked. Lily constantly wrote short stories with messages about justice and kindness. Her narratives, though simple, conveyed important values that Rebecca was determined to preserve. Noah created drawings and paintings that decorated all the family's properties. His art brought color and joy to spaces that were once purely functional. On the 3rd anniversary of the discovery of the box, Rebecca organized a big party at the ranch. She invited all the families that had been helped by the social projects, employees from her companies, and local authorities. During the party, the town mayor gave an emotional speech. "On behalf of the entire population, I want to thank Rebecca and her family for the transformation they have brought to our region. You have proven that true wealth is that which is shared." Mr. George, now 83 years old, also spoke. "I knew Rebecca's father when he was young. John would be so proud to see how his daughter used the inheritance he preserved. She has honored his memory in the best way possible." Ethan asked to speak on behalf of his siblings. "I want to thank my mum for teaching us that money doesn't change who we are inside. We are rich now, but we are still the same family that helps each other and helps others." Rebecca was moved by her son's words. Her efforts to educate the children were bearing fruit. That night, after everyone had left, Rebecca went up to the attic of the new house. There, she carefully stored the box that had changed their lives. Inside it, besides the original documents, were now photos of all the families that had been helped, thank you letters, and records of all the social projects created. The box had become the symbol of her family's transformation. From a hidden treasure, it had become a legacy of justice and solidarity. Rebecca wrote a letter to place in the box addressed to her children in the future. "My dear children, when you read this letter, you will already be adults and responsible for everything we have built together. I want you to always remember that our wealth did not begin with money, but with love, unity, and determination. The box that Ethan found in the roof gave us much more than properties. It gave us the opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives. I hope you continue to use that opportunity wisely. Always remember to help those in need. to fight against injustice, and to never forget where we came from. True wealth lies in the relationships we build and the good we do. Be happy, be fair, be generous. With all my love, Mom. 5 years after the discovery of the box, Rebecca had become one of the most influential women in the region. Her businesses thrived, her social projects benefited thousands of people, and her family was united and happy. Ethan, at 15, was already considered a young expert in agriculture. He participated in fairs and conferences, sharing the knowledge he had acquired on the ranch. Emily Grace, at 13, had created a financial education app for young people that was being used in schools in several cities. Lily, at 12, had published a children's storybook whose profits were donated to public libraries. Noah, at 10, had organized several art exhibitions to raise funds for social projects. The family had become an example of how to use wealth responsibly and conscientiously. But perhaps Rebecca's greatest legacy was not financial, but moral. She had broken a cycle of injustice that had lasted decades in the region. Where there was once corruption and embezzlement, there was now transparency and solidarity. The Public Interest Law Office had expanded and now served several neighboring towns. Attoucheur Richard Thompson had become a national advocate for the rights of small landowners. Susan had graduated from law school with a scholarship offered by Rebecca and now worked at the office, specializing in cases of document forgery. Mrs. Dorothy, at 77, had become the children's official grandmother. She lived in a comfortable house on the family property and was consulted on all important decisions. Rebecca's story inspired other people in the region to report injustices and fight for their rights. Several families managed to recover properties that had been usurped over the years. The region as a whole had benefited from the positive effect of Rebecca's actions. Economic development brought jobs, improved infrastructure, and raised everyone's quality of life. On a Sunday afternoon, 10 years after that fateful flood, Rebecca was sitting on the porch of her house, watching Ethan play with Noah in the backyard. Emily Grace was reading an economics book, and Lily was writing in her diary. Mrs. Dorothy approached and sat down next to Rebecca. "What are you thinking about, my dear?" "I'm thinking about how unpredictable life is," replied Rebecca. 10 years ago, I was a poor seamstress who almost lost everything in a flood. Today I am responsible for businesses and projects that affect the lives of thousands of people. And are you happy with your life? Rebecca looked around, seeing her healthy and happy children, her comfortable home, and all the opportunities she could now offer the family. Very happy, but also very responsible. Every decision I make affects many people. Your father would be proud. I hope so. He hid that box, hoping that one day it would bring justice. I think we managed to honor his expectations. You certainly did. And more, you turned individual justice into social justice. That evening during dinner, Rebecca once again told the children the story of how it all began. It was a family tradition to tell the story of the box at least once a month. "And if Ethan hadn't insisted on checking the roof?" asked Lily. "Then we would still be poor but united," replied Rebecca. "Wealth improved our living conditions. But what really matters is the love we have for each other." "And if you had given up when Patricia started making threats?" asked Emily Grace. "Then I would have taught you that we should run from difficulties instead of facing them. That would have been much worse than remaining poor." "Mom, do you think we will face difficult challenges too?" asked Ethan. "You certainly will, my son. Life always brings challenges, but you have something I didn't have. Education, resources, and experience. You will be better prepared." "And what if we don't know what to do?" "Then remember the lessons we learned. Be honest, fight for what is right, never stop helping those in need, and always keep the family united." The children nodded, absorbing their mother's teachings. Later, when everyone was asleep, Rebecca went back up to the attic to look at the box. Now it was full of documents, photos, letters, and memories from a decade of transformation. She picked up the first document Ethan had seen on the day of the flood, the letter from her father. She reread the words that had changed her life. "Use wisely and protect our secrets." She smiled, thinking she had done much more than use wisely. She had transformed the secrets into strength to help other people. The box that once held painful secrets now held happy memories and important achievements. It was the perfect symbol of her family's journey, from victims of injustice to agents of social change. Outside, a light rain began to fall. Rebecca remembered the morning of the flood and how the water had almost destroyed everything. Now, the sound of the rain soothed her, reminding her that sometimes everything must be washed away so something new and better can grow. She closed the box carefully and went down to her room. Tomorrow would be another day of work, more important decisions, more opportunities to make a difference. But it would also be another day with her children, more family moments, more joy in a life that had been transformed by the courage to never give up. The box in the roof had revealed much more than documents. It had revealed that even in the most desperate situations, there is always hope for those who have the courage to fight for what is right. And that was the greatest legacy Rebecca could leave to her children, the certainty that it is worth fighting for justice, even when all seems lost. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. Do you believe Rebecca made the right decisions at every moment? Which part moved you the most? Leave your honest comment about this journey of struggle, forgiveness, and transformation. Your opinion is very important to us.